what Soulmatics is also offering is a shift in our orientation to meditation, from one of masculine to feminine. If we are in a masculine meditation, like orientation towards meditation, what are we doing? We're trying to focus. It's completely mental, right? And it's very challenging for people, right? Because they have to work through all of the noise and the chatter, which are actually stemming from the unprocessed feelings. So if we come into a receptive state, well, all those feelings don't want to be unprocessed. They want to process. Feelings want to be felt. Sensations want to be sensed. So if we can breathe and allow what's there to be experienced, number one, that's bringing us now into presence, which is the goal of meditation.
Hey, you, and welcome back to Between Worlds. I'm your host, Ariel, and I'm really glad that you're here today because this conversation is really special. You're going to hear me say a lot on this show that life is magical, and I honestly, truly think that it is. Now, take a moment with me right here. Think about a person in your life that means a lot to you. Not someone that you're related to, but someone that you have met along your journey. Now think back to the moment that you met them. Where were you? Who was around? What were all the little details? Who may have said hi first? Picture that moment for a second. Now I want you to think about one thing that had to go right for you to meet this person. Were you running late for work and you happened to run into them? Were you assigned to share a college dorm with that person? Did they happen to meet you or meet a family in an RV park and then introduce you to someone in a different campsite? Every person in your life is a magical addition, and the amount of things that have to go right for that person to have met you, that is what makes life truly magical. And you kind of trace it back to anyone in your life and go, okay, this had to click here and this had to click there for this all to happen. Now, I tell you this because the guest I have on today is someone I met through the same type of magic. The right circumstance had to happen for me to make a specific connection that later connected me to Phil in a very important time in, honestly, both of our lives. His name is Phil Kreutzer. He is the founder of Soulmatics, a body of work that sits in the intersection of neuroscience, the nervous system, and something much bigger than all of us. He works with people who are ready to clear everything that's been standing between them and who they actually are, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And he's on the edge of something truly amazing. I think by the end of this conversation, you're going to feel exactly the same way and you'll get it. So let's get started. Thank you so much for being on the show, Phil. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you for that beautiful intro. I'm excited to jam with you here.
Absolutely. These are the type of conversations that are the most fun too, when they just kind of keep rolling. So before we kind of dive into your work, I always like to start with who you are. So kind of where things have started, the elevator speak of who Phil is before we dig into the work that you've been gifted.
Well, I think truth is a big concept for me, and I consider it a spiritual technology. And truth carries a certain vibration and coherence to it that is different from others. Like you can feel if someone is speaking from a place of truth or if they're speaking just from, a different place. And for me, growing up in a dysfunctional family, like so many of us have, truth can be a challenging vibration for dysfunctional families. And that's because truth is in our trauma. And so when we're speaking truth and we're existing in that vibration, for people not ready to integrate their trauma, it's like poking at what's there. And so in my case, truth was not a welcome vibration in my childhood. After a certain age, I had a seminal traumatic event that changed my life at 6 years old. And then not only was it not welcome like in our family dynamic, but then I kind of closed it off within my system. And so then I lived a whole life in untruth. And if you can't speak truth, if you can't live truth, then you figure out ways to manipulate reality to get what you need, to go around, beat around the bush, to do everything but speak truth. And so I've been on this really long, windy initiation into understanding truth and coming back into truth from untruth. And I'm said truth so many times in this intro. But yeah, it's been a profound journey. And the reason that I have, I guess chosen that long, windy road is so that I could guide others where I've walked. And so now, yeah, just showing up more and more authentically, um, and with a pure heart, and like just showing the power of love, living into the power of love, and yeah, supporting others and living into their truth.
Yeah, that resonates so much. And I know that you said the word truth so much, but what comes to mind is like truth and authenticity are the same thing in my perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
I have found that the more authentic I've shown up, right, the more the world's kind of blossomed for me. The more that doors have become open, the more that friendships have deepened, the better my relationship has become with my kids, where it's like when you kind of turn back to yourself, right, and you find your way back to your own truth and your own authenticity, everything else seems to open up. So tell me, what was that transition for you? Because I know I can imagine, right, as after you identify this thing, right, this you identify knowing that you couldn't speak your truth. What was that shift for you as a person where you kind of decided enough's enough, I'm going to do it different?
Um, well, I think one other piece to mention here, as the antidote to truth, is shame. And shame is one of those vibrations. Actually, and David R. Hawkins has an emotional spectrum of consciousness where he maps it all out, and it goes from 0 to 1,000. And 0 is just you're not alive, but shame is actually just one notch above not being alive. And so it's at 20, I think 20 hertz.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then we go up from there into other lower vibrational energies like fear, guilt, anger, and all the way at the top we have love, ecstasy, bliss, Christ consciousness. And so shame is like the wet blanket over truth, where it's different than guilt. Like shame is you believe you are fundamentally bad, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, and that is a very challenging thing to work through if you don't have the context or the understanding of any of this stuff, which I didn't for so long. And so it was like I was just trapped on an island of inauthenticity and fear and shame and separation from my true self. And I knew that there was like this real me under it all somewhere, but I had no idea how to find him. Like no idea. And I experienced these glimpses of it. I knew that I had a pure heart and I cared about people, but it was like, yo, but how? How? Like if I get a really good night of sleep, or if I like, smoke just the right amount of weed and had just like a few drinks, then I'd be like in the zone. I'd be like, man, this feels like I'm liberated in my authenticity. But how do we contact that, and how do we become that with sustainability or with continuity? So for me, it wasn't until maybe I was like, gosh, it was much later in life. I think I was 31 when the love of my life broke up with me, and that was such a powerful catalyst because nothing was really working in my life, but I knew I loved her, and I knew I loved that, and so when that left, it just crumbled my foundation, and that is the source of so many people's awakenings. Because the foundation is kind of the rigidity of the identity structure that's crumbling. And you go from rigidity, static, to dynamic, which is flow, which is where authenticity is experienced. And deep pain can be a portal of deep clarity, right? If we're surrendered to it, if we experience it, we don't numb out and avoid and run away from it. And so at that point, it really rocked me in the best way. And then I decided to leave my company that was not really aligned with me, and just take a leap of faith. And so I left my company. I got back into psychedelics, which I had been really terrified to do, but in a very formal, ceremonial context. And I decided to book a one-way ticket to Asia, and then did a couple years of solo international travel as a seeker, exploring different spiritual paths, exploring different healing modalities, and seek and ye shall find. And so then I started, like, piece by piece, kind of reclaiming myself, living into more truth, and liberating into a more authentic existence. And it was the best decision of my life. And then in hindsight, the things that are so difficult for the ego are actually so liberating for the true self. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes origin story.
Oh, that's great. The Cliff Notes origin story. I'm going to use that. That's awesome. It's interesting because I've been even on my own spiritual journey a lot lately. The theme keeps coming up where it's like the dark night of the soul and what emerges after a really dark situation in your life. And I know probably a lot of people listening, I know I can definitely resonate with that, where it's like some of the hardest moments in my life and the things that I've really had to overcome were right before the most amazing transformational times of my life. Right. So it's like I had to have one for the other. And I think, and I talk about this a lot, where it's the contrast in life that makes things beautiful, right? We feel joy because we felt sadness. It's the contrast, like when we feel love, it's because we felt the alternative or alternate emotion. It's like that contrast in life is what makes, honestly, what makes it so fun, right? What makes it so beautiful. Because if we were joyful all the time, then it wouldn't be special anymore. And so I love that you say that, because I think that's really impactful. And honestly, how brave too to say, you know what, this one thing fell apart and I'm actually just gonna remove all things that aren't serving me, right? Taking the risk with your job, going somewhere on a one-way ticket, that's really brave. And I don't think people give enough credibility to that fact. Like, most people will stay doing the same thing for their entire life. I mean, think about people who stay with companies for 30 years that hated it the moment they started working, right? And so the fact that you were willing to do that, I think, is it really speaks to your character, and the courage, right? Now, so you go to Asia. Walk me through kind of what was that awakening for you in Asia. I know you were exploring different healing modalities, but like, what was the big aha moment that you feel like really broke everything open for you?
Well, it was a series of aha moments. The breakup was quite difficult, and but yeah, psychedelics were a huge catalyst for me, and I had also some trauma from an earlier psychedelic experience when I was 23 years old that I hadn't integrated, and so it took 10 years off because I was just terrified to go back into that world. And so facing that fear was hugely transformational, and it brought a bit of healing. It brought a more spaciousness and openness and spiritual connection. And so it's like, and also with it, hey, if you go into your fears, in the cave you fear lies the treasure you seek. And so it started to shift my relationship to fear. And so I had been wanting to get out of my company for a long time but I was terrified. Like, what am I going to do? This is all I've ever known. And so taking that leap of faith, just to leave and into the unknown, and not knowing where it was leading, was like so profoundly transformational, and so like um, eye-opening, because I had thought I could not do anything outside of something that I didn't enjoy. Like that's the only thing I could do to be successful. And it was like, no, actually, that was just a complete ego trip. Like, that is not real at all. And then I just awoke to the fact that I can do anything that I really feel inspired to. So yeah, I mean, I loaded up all kinds of, you know, tantra retreat, sexual healing, my yoga teacher training, vipassana, silent meditation, all the things that one does, and visiting all kinds of healers. There was so much ungrounded energy within me, and this can happen with people on spiritual awakenings, where it's almost like you're manic, and I certainly was, and I didn't have any guides to help ground me or contextualize what was going on. Again, so I could guide others in hindsight. But yeah, in terms of like, there were so many openings, and I think of spiritual awakening as just finding more coherence in the field and within yourself, and that's an infinite spectrum. So there was many moments of finding more coherence, and many moments of like also being on a spiritual ego trip, thinking I'm like the chosen one, when I was experiencing profound experiences, which were all the chosen one. But we can really kind of get on a spiritual ego trip there. So there was so much. It's hard to kind of distill it down to one experience, but Yeah, the biggest thing is seeking you shall find. And so you just keep seeking, you keep finding. And I think initially you're seeking a lot outside of yourself, and it's just kind of like The Alchemist, that book where you can go all around the world, and so many people do. They wake up and they leave their company and they go to Bali, they go to Tulum, they go to these different places. Um, and then it always comes back to self. And then when we start seeking within, that's where we find the inner wholeness and fulfillment, and then we don't need to seek outside of ourselves anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because I think you're right. Like when you take a step and you look at a lot of people on this spiritual journey, you're totally right. They get this excitement and then they go to those places, right? These spiritual places, Egypt, Bali, Dubai, all these places because they're searching for something. But then ultimately, what is it? Jesus says that, the kingdom is within us, right? When we really look at a lot of these spiritual texts and the things that we've been taught for thousands of years, it's like the kingdom is within and it's going within. It's what meditation is so strong. So I love that part of your journey. Now, I want to dig into to your work a little bit. I know, Soulmatics is really exciting. I can't wait for you to share that. But kind of so you're in Asia, you're going through this experience. What was the catalyst to kind of get you to doing your own thing, to building this brand or to kind of founding this other modality?
Yeah, before I even go down there, just one more thing to double click on.
Please.
The reason people go travel and then why that's so useful is like you know, where you're living previously, everyone's holding you hostage to who they know you've been up until this
Mm-hmm.
point. So when you go travel, you're leaving all that behind, and you just get to be born again and meet new people, and that's one of the amazing benefits of that part of the journey. So now coming back to your question, so I had done, at the during the breakup, I had signed up. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go all in on my growth. So I had signed up for a 2-year mindfulness coaching program with Jack Cornfield and Tara Brock, which was phenomenal. It was life changing, and that like really provided so much. Like I said, I didn't have a mentor. I did have a mentor. Janice Gates, who was my mentor in that program. But it helped to slow me down. I didn't I wasn't a great student, but I got what I needed out of that. And so at the end of the 2 years, which was like when I was ready to kind of land the plane, um, I actually wasn't really interested in coaching until towards the end of that. And then I decided, yeah, actually, I feel like inspired to explore that space and to get into that game. And like for me, I was always curious about consciousness and human behavior. And I wanted to be a psychology major in college, but I didn't think I had the brain to process and digest the density of the information. So I didn't. And that was a trap because actually to truly understand consciousness, all you need to do is clear your own consciousness, clear your own channel. It's not about understanding complex information. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue it's the opposite. That's the trap. Um, so that inspiration just opened up to me, and I decided that I would get into coaching. Um, and that was like early 2020. And then I launched my coaching practice on Friday, March 13th, 2020, when the day before COVID, it shut everything down. And at that point, I had a little bit of practice, but you just jump in the deep end, and then you find out how to swim, and you find out really how to guide people and work with people, not to process. And so for people that are considering doing that, I would say really practice. It's about getting hours, and before you charge, just offer it up to friends and family, and get the hours, and then you'll be ready to go and charge.
Yeah, totally. And that's sometimes it's jumping feet first and doing the action, right? It's like when you contemplate and you think about something and you're like, I'm planning for it. You could do that all day long, forever, right? And never get anywhere. It's better just to do the action and go through the bumps and bruises and get your reps in than it ever is just waiting and contemplating. So that's great. So now walk me through Soulmatics. What is Soulmatics? How is it different from Somatics? And kind of where did that start for you?
Yeah, so somatic just means of the body. And somatic experiencing is how we process, metabolize energy through the nervous system. So we could think of like feeling feelings and sensing sensations. And Soulmatics is a name that just came to me to kind of capture a broader perspective and approach to the somatic paradigm. And somatic experiencing is a whole body of work. It was pioneered by a guy named Dr. Peter Levine, and he has a 3-year training in this modality, which I did not have. And it's quite extensive, like very robust. A lot of people have done it. And yet I feel like there's this gap in the somatic space. And so Soulmatics is incorporating divine intelligence into the equation, because divine intelligence is real and it's available for us to co-create. And so it is both the co-creating intelligence that can guide a somatic experience, but it's also the context, right? Because we are non-separate, but separation is real too, right? So we come into this world as non-separate, as just extensions of source energy, as pure inspiration personified. And then conditioning accumulates into what we could call a separation consciousness that is held by the ego, or we could just say it's the ego, right? And so really the source of all suffering is this conditioned self, or the separate self, or the ego, right? And so in my mind, the only thing that we're actually solving for is the separation. Let's dissolve the separation to come back into that authentic true self. I'm talking about truth earlier. And so what I have learned through Soulmatics is that when we open up to receive the present moment energetically, right? Because on a fundamental level, all disparate phenomena in the universe is energy. And so how do we experience the present moment? It's through energy. It's through feeling, right? Just think about that. How do you experience the present moment? Everything's energy. So through our sense perception. So we're seeing now, we're hearing now, we're smelling now, we're tasting now, we're feeling now. All the now things are energetic experiences. So when we breathe and receive and open up to allow what is emergent, what is here in this moment, right? Something profound can open up to us. And that is what I call the flow continuum, which is really just how we experience source intelligence, right? And this is like kind of like a lot for people to grasp, but like the way I conceptualize it is that, what is God? We could use God and source interchangeably with divine intelligence. Well, any true channel of source will always self-identify as all it is. And if we're looking through the energetic lens of physics, well, what contains all that is? Unconditional love, right? If you think about that, just the math of unconditional love. Unconditional love is like, no, you can't come in here. Everyone else is welcome, but not you. Unconditional love is unconditional. Everything is welcome within it. Therefore, it contains everything within it. Now, the present moment is all that we have as well. And so everything is contained in the present moment. And so source is the moment, is unconditional love. And so when we allow ourselves to receive energetically the present moment, we're allowing divine intelligence to come into our field. And that divine intelligence is coming to our field, and it's searching for, where is there separation consciousness? Where is there held separate consciousness, static energy, that we can actually support you in dissolving? Because what that is doing is it's dissolving your ego, which is revealing more true self. And so just as sunrise and sunset are happening simultaneously across the globe at all times, dissolution of the separate self, the conditioned self, the ego, is the revelation of the true self. They're the same exact thing. And so if we dissolve the separation, we restore the connection, we restore the unity. And one way of thinking about that, I know I just threw a lot at you there, is dissolving the distortions of our true self vibration, of our true self coherence. So the more we dissolve the separate self, the more we cohere fully in true self. And this has profound implications for our life, because we don't want to make decisions from our separate self, because then we would be thinking we know better than God. And that is separate from the intelligence that animates and funds all of existence. So we want to be right in that way. We want to be in coherence with that because God knows us better than we know ourselves. And so if we can trust that flow, this is where, all spiritual teachers talk about surrender, right? The surrender experiment, Michael Singer, untethered soul, David R. Hawkins, letting go. When you let go, surrender, and untether, guess what happens? Miracles, because there is a divine order to things. And that is a sacred geometrical kind of architecture that we come into. That's the coherence that I'm talking about, where you become right place, right time, because you're synced up with source. You're cohered with that intelligence. And this is why people on the awakening path, remember we talked about awakening, finding more coherence in the field. You find more coherence in the field, then you become more synchronistic. And the ultimate realization of this is, let's say, full unity consciousness would be something like a flock of birds or a school of fish, where they're not filtering through the mind. They're just one with the intelligence of the universe, all moving in unison.
It's interesting. So you're saying, when we think about this connection to divine, to source, to God, you're saying that kind of exists within the present moment. Because I know when we look at a lot of healing modalities,
Not kind
it's
of.
like, well, it does, right?
It
so
is.
It exists in
the present moment. Yeah.
In the present moment. Because I know when we think about a lot of other healing modalities, it's like the purpose of a lot of those things is to get into the present moment, right? We think about meditation and we think about the somatic exercises and that kind of stuff. It's to get into the body, into the moment, right? The moment that we breathe and we recognize our breath, right? It's that connection between the parasympathetic nervous system. It's like that's what gets turned on because you're reconnecting to yourself. So what you're saying is that when you find your way to connecting to the present moment through feelings, which is like the gateway, right? When you connect with the feelings, you're connecting to the present moment, and in that space is where God is where we can connect with source intelligence.
Correct. And all of our accumulated, unprocessed conditioning, right? Our traumas, our unprocessed emotions, our fears, right? That are held in the body, trapped energy. That trapped energy is the barrier between us and that flow continuum, that divine intelligence.
Interesting.
Right? Because if we have unprocessed feeling, then we're subconsciously resisting flow. And that's holding those energetic blocks in. If we allow them, we open up the gates, be like, hey, everything's welcome, right? Soulmatics is unconditional receiving, which is matching source frequency of unconditional love. And when we come into that unconditional receiving vibration or consciousness, then we're placing no friction on any intelligent reconstitution of energy. So what's going to happen is that divine intelligence, which we could also say is synonymous with the innate intelligence of the nervous system, is going to bring forth whatever unprocessed energy is the priority for that moment, that it's highest serving, taking everything into consideration. So knowing that you, Ariel, came into this world with this curriculum to be this person, they know where you are in your journey, everything that you've experienced, everything that you're holding that's blocking you from your full potential. What you really love in life, they know everything about you. So they're going to bring forth whatever sequence of experiences that are most serving for that highest self timeline, that highest expression. And our job is to come into an unconditional receiving state. So we're not interfering. We're allowing the greater intelligence to guide the show. And we're just meeting experience as it presents, feeling the feeling, sensing the sensations. And so as we experience the top layer, say that's tightness in the chest, fully sensing the sensation, then that's what's allowing the energy travel and passage through. Then whatever subsequent experience, whatever new layer then is underneath that will present itself, and we meet that with experience and meet the next and the next and the next. And we're allowing the nervous system to unburden itself of all this trapped energy, right? Which, by the way, if we have trapped energy, it's not meant to be trapped. It wants to flow. Our energy is keeping it trapped. Therefore, it's biologically taxing. So if we allow the nervous, so one way of thinking about it is allowing, just from a pure physiological, biological standpoint, we're allowing the nervous system to unburden itself of all this taxed energy that it's spending on keeping us so tightly wound, keeping us in the sympathetic nervous system, right? And so that's just pays dividends for our physical health. But then now, additionally, now our emotional health, all this unprocessed emotion is allowed to move through. We're going to be in a much more equanimity state of equanimity, right? Where now uh, like some people don't allow themselves to feel certain emotions. Well, all emotions are meant to be welcome in our experience. And then now everything can flow through. We can be in flow with life instead of resisting life. So it's very much, it is completely through the body. That is the access point and the point of separation.
You know what I find so interesting and also simplistic about this? Because I think when we think about any healing modality, it's like there has to be some certain level of simplicity for people to adopt it. You know, and it's we speak about synchronicities too, because it's funny. It's like the books that you read and then the conversations you have, and there's so many like similarities between them because when, it is our mind that moves feelings longer than they should last. Like when we think about, I read somewhere and I can't remember what book it was, but it's like a feeling itself only lasts for a certain period of time. It's our thoughts and our mind that makes it bigger or long, makes it last longer or it grows. It's usually our mind that makes things last longer than they should or feelings last longer than they should. And what you're explaining is it's like less about figuring out the thoughts behind these feelings or like the why you're having the feeling. It's just a matter of feeling it and noticing it and letting it go. And it sounds very similar to like, I guess the concept of meditation where it's like you feel a feeling and you tag it and then let it go, or you feel an emotion, you tag it and you let it go, or a thought, right? But this feels simpler because there's no thinking involved. Is that
Yeah.
resonating?
Yeah.
Okay.
So much that we could say on all of that. So the reason, you know, many people have said that, right? That if we're in full surrender to an emotional experience, then it will move through us. And a lot of people use the term letting go. I prefer letting flow because it's just energy within us that's trying to, the feeling just wants to be felt.
Mm-hmm.
The sensation just wants to be sensed,
Right.
right? Fully. But this is where we need to go into the body. Because if we don't do that, what happens is people feel the emotion kind of percolating, and then they don't like the way it feels, and then they go into their mind and go into the story of why they hate this feeling, why they don't like this, whatever that is, and they're not fully processing the energy. It's just kind of simmering like beneath the surface that's sending them into the mind, and they're just in looped thinking. And so the solution there is to like come back to the breath. All right, separate out from the story and just go into the direct experience of the energy in the body, and then it'll move through. And David R. Hawkins, who's an amazing consciousness wizard, says that all thoughts stem from unprocessed feelings. And so it's certainly been my experience too. I'm in agreement that if we process the underlying feelings, then the stories and the thoughts that go with them dissolve. And so what Soulmatics is also offering is a shift in our orientation to meditation, from one of masculine to feminine. Because right now on the planet, there's so much held up potential, right? Because remember, we're talking about in the body, and that is all that unprocessed stuff is what's closing us, keeping us separate from source, keeping us separate from the present moment, keeping us separate from true love consciousness, true self consciousness. And so if we are in a masculine meditation, like orientation towards meditation, what are we doing? We're trying to focus. It's completely mental, right? And it's very challenging for people, right? Because they have to work through all of the noise and the chatter, which are actually stemming from the unprocessed feelings. So if we come into a receptive state, well, all those feelings don't want to be unprocessed. They want to process. Feelings want to be felt. Sensations want to be sensed. So if we can breathe and allow what's there to be experienced, number one, that's bringing us now into presence, which is the goal of meditation, right? Because presence is emergent. The feeling's like, yo, as you're in your masculine meditation, you're not listening to the stuff that's like the present moment, like knocking on your door. It's like, no, I'm trying to focus. I'm trying to be present, right? But it's really hard because all this noise, right, which is coming from the solution knocking on your door. Hey, if you just feel the feelings, right, the thoughts that are making this challenging will dissolve. You'll come into more quiet mind, but also you'll come into more coherence because you're no longer subconsciously resisting what is wanting to bring you into that coherence.
Oh man, that resonates so much because when we think about the masculine and the feminine connections, it's like the feminine is felt in the body and the masculine is the consciousness and awareness, right? It's like, and when you think about it that way, it kind of changes your perspective on so many things. So I love that you said that, because I didn't think about that. I didn't
It,
think that the way that we meditate and this, think about a lot, let it go, whatever, is a very masculine way of doing that. That's so interesting. But you're
yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah, that's damming up like all of human potential right now for the
Hmm.
planet. So this emergent theme of rise of the feminine,
Yeah.
right? What is that? It's the shift in that orientation to one of feminine receptivity. So what I was talking about is opening our channel to receive. That's such a key word and key consciousness, key orientation. Like receive emergence, allow that which is emergent to be received and experienced. And when we open up to that, everything that we described, right, all of this unprocessed energy, right, is welcomed to move through us. And the unprocessed energy, the held energy, is always on the lower density end of the spectrum. We're not holding on to joy that's like siloed
Yeah.
off anywhere, right? Those,
Yep.
those right, as we dissolve the density, right, the held energies from our conditioning, then we rise in frequency, right? And so this is how the feminine rises.
Hmm.
And then now also we're opening the channel to receive infinite funding from the universe of emergent currents, high vibrational currents of joy, ecstasy, bliss, pleasure, desire, creativity, love. Those are emergent. Those are just available to us as we dissolve what is blocking us from that. So we're holding in the density and we're holding back the high frequency, the funding of life force. And this is the Soulmatics paradigm. This is what I and others are, crystallizing, distilling, demystifying, and
That's it.
holding the door open to experientially. This is how this works. So I think of Soulmatics as not so much of a methodology as so much as it is unmasking innate capacity that we all have and just telling it like it is. Coming back to truth as a technology. If we provide true, accurate context to consciousness, then it remembers, right? Like it resonates with truth. It knows truth because truth is a cosmic constant. It's like, divine intelligence. It's like we remember because we are non-separate. We're just in the illusion of separation. So when we remember truth is remembrance technology too. It's like, right, that's familiar. I remember that. Okay, now we can then activate with and orient within that coherence now, or within that truth technology.
That's so interesting. It's again, life is magic, right? It's the synchronicities of it. And I've been very deep in this women space. I went to Envision recently in the red tent, and so I'm pretty deep in like, the women circles and the feminine, divine feminine, and all of that stuff, womb wisdom. And it's so interesting because someone I was listening to recently, it's the Highest Self podcast, and she was talking about how, a lot of what meditation is today is living in these higher chakras, right? Your throat, your third eye, and your crown chakra. But the reality is like so much happens in the body in the lower chakras. And so people are like bypassing the body to focus on these spaces of enlightenment. Joe Dispenza does a lot of meditations in that space as well. But for women, our power comes from getting back into the body. Like that is where femininity lives. It's the receiving, like you said. And so it's just interesting how I see a big call for what you're talking about. I hear a lot of women who are reclaiming what you're speaking to and reclaiming the womb space and our creativity and the things that are beautiful about being a woman. And so I just find it so interesting. So you do coaching, is that like one-on-one, or what other, do you do other programs? How do you get this information to the world?
Well, calling in all the support to put the word out. So yeah, one-on-ones. I work in my one-on-one context mostly with visionaries, creatives, founders, people with a lot of downstream impact that are on the awakening journey already, and I help clear their channels, stabilize the consciousness that's coming through, so we can ground into reality. And then I have group programs. I have a men's program. I have a women's program where everything is centered around somatics, everything that we just talked about. taking people into this journey experientially because it's the only place that can happen. And yeah, it's a very living, breathing container, right? Like, because truth is technology, the group field is alive, and also predominantly, all people on the awakening path, predominantly coaches, founders, creatives, but anyone who's meant for that journey, aligned to it, is welcome. And that's a 3.5 month group coaching program. Actually, my next women's program kicks off tonight, and next men's is in June. And in addition to that, I'm a visionary. I got a lot of inspiration coming through, and so in the past, it's been a challenge to ground it. I've been certainly guilty of living in the higher chakras, and now taking my own medicine, working with other coaches, and by the way, we have a whole huge body of work to move through, all of our accumulated conditioning, so much layers there. We have such an immense capacity. So the journey going from here to here is just think of the disassociation. We're living above the neck, and it's just layer by layer, we go deeper into the lower chakras, and that takes time. But that descent is also an ascent, as I said, because as we dissolve the density, which is kind of the layering, then we rise in frequency. So yeah, and even among somatic practitioners, somatic thought leaders, and well-practiced coaches and everything, they're still, to me, there's such a gap in missing this receiving, this deep receiving. So yeah, those are my current kind of offerings that I'm putting out to the world. There's a few other projects that I'm very excited about. I don't know if I should get into them here. But with the founders that are making their way to me, there are world-changing technologies and movements that we are stewarding together as we open the channel. And so there's this new paradigm emerging that I'm calling the coherence economy. And so as we find more coherence, right, awakening is finding more coherence, this is happening on a micro and macro level. Well, with my visionaries, we're clearing the channel, and there's real energy coming down. This is not just made up fairy magic stuff. This is real, right? And so now, to me, consciousness is a variable in our economy. And we can stabilize that. If it's stabilized, consciousness is coming down. It's wanting to make manifest from source, directly from source. Mm-hmm. And if that is true, well, then it's going to be supported with other variables in the field, other people, synchronicity, right place, right time. And that's opening up. And we have some very exciting things that are developing that we're bringing forward, and just the beginning. So I think that's enough for now, because I could do a whole podcast on stuff that's going on up here for sure.
So what he's saying is there'll be a part 2 eventually, so everyone stay tuned. But no, I think that's great. And what I hear you saying is it's ultimately when we think about inspiration comes from source, right? Even when we think about it coming from the crown chakra, it's because that's the connection to source. And so what you're saying is it's the more we clear out these blockages, and I know there's tons of books out there. The Body Keeps Score is a big one. So this isn't a new concept for people, but it's as we clear out these blockages and we find our way to the present moment through the body, right? We reconnect with source. We become more open and available to receive inspiration, or downloads is what people will call them, things that are coming from source that could impact the world. And so when I hear you say that you work with the founders, CEOs, people who have some decent impact. Why do you feel like that's the group that you're called to? Is it so that you have the most impact? What made you realize that that's kind of where you were called to affect people?
Well, I left out light workers. I consider them all light workers, but light workers is a big piece.
Define light workers if someone's never heard that before.
Yeah, so everything that I just described about the Soulmatics paradigm is we're allowing the light of source in, right? When I say open our receiving channel, we're allowing light in, right? Because all that stuff, all that accumulated conditioning lives in our shadow. Probably heard that term shadow before. That's in the dark, right? And so if light can't get in, then nothing's going to shift, right? It's just stuck there. But by opening up to receive, we're allowing light in, and this is actually quite literal. Like it's metaphorical, but also literal. So it's like light actually coming into our quantum biology is what's happening. And so light workers are here to, right, bring more light into the world, shine more lights, do shadow work, guide people to their own, to bringing more light into their field. Now, most light workers on the planet are not aware of what I just described, of this Soulmatics paradigm, and actually how that happens, like, and interfacing directly with source. So this is the power of Soulmatics, is we're literally just interfacing directly with source. A lot of light workers are, there's amazing, powerful light workers out there. They're the interface, and then they're the in between other people. Now they can come into a living, breathing coherence with source and like act as an intermediary, and that can be really powerful. But a lot of light workers have the wounded healer thing going on, and so they're operating at a fraction of their capacity and actually gifts that they could be if they allowed the light into their field in the way that I'm teaching.
Can you give an example of that? Like what, like a real life application example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, for my own journey, when I started coaching, I was not nearly as clear as I am right now, right? Because all of this is clarifying our channel. The more that we process the distortions out, the more clear and coherent we become. And now the quality of the information that can come through my channel can be much, much cleaner and clearer, like to godly degrees. And so what happens in those scenarios, like as one becomes more coherent, your style starts to reflect that. Right? Because like your clothing, for instance, is just now an extension of who you are fundamentally, like who you are, what your energetic constitution is essentially. And so you'll see this, that like people will like have dramatic shifts from being like corporate matrix to like now they have spiritual tattoos and like they live in Bali or something. Like that is profound metamorphosis. Now, if they were coaching the whole time, then you want to work with them, like further downstream, even, or sometimes it's, people are like taken over by spiritual ego. That's a big thing too. So that can be something that can be like distorting the channel of their gifts. And you want to steer clear of that, and people can fall victim to that. There's a lot here. Sorry.
It's okay.
But for me in my journey, earlier on, I didn't know what I was doing as much. I was more operating from separation consciousness and my ego of like, shoot, I got to figure this out. And fear kind of driving that, anxiety driving that. I think I know, but I'm not sure. And so me dying 1,000 ego deaths, clearing my channel, now I'm so much more grounded and rooted in my gifts, and less is more, and allowing source to guide the show. But I've experienced, all kinds of, and the more that you clear within yourself, the more that you can see other people's shadow on full display. So you can see some, psychics that are like, or some light workers that are just out of control spiritual ego, that are like, they're probably doing more harm than good for these people. That's a thing. And, I definitely worked earlier in my journey, I would work with some people that I thought were maybe more impressive than they were.
That's so true. Oh man, that's so true. And it's interesting. You say light worker, and it's funny. I've heard that term so many times, and I'm like, okay, like you identify the term, but you don't really think about like why it's called that. And that I think was a beautiful way of defining it in a way that I like really resonated, where I'm like, oh, okay. And it's funny too, because the other thing that I think is so magical is like, as people are growing in this stage, who you were at the beginning might have been the perfect person to resonate with the person that you impacted. Like, and I think when you go through your own journey, like knowing that you've been through the ego piece of that is really special, because now when you interact with someone who's struggling with that, right, it comes from a space of I've been there, right? It comes from I see you because I was you, and there's a safety in that. And so it just, again, it speaks to the divine intelligence that it's like, it's all for a reason. Every step of our journey is like meant to be that step to make you the right person for somebody. I heard the analogy once where it's like, we're all a key. So if you imagine you're looking at a key, and each key has its own like specific grooves and dips and mountains and valleys. And it's like that key is specific. Each thing that you've been through creates the divots and the cuts so that it's perfect for the right lock, right? And that might be another person. And so it's like you're the perfect unlock for someone. And then as you grow and develop and your key changes, then you're something else for someone else's lock, right? And so I think it's all intentional and it's all beautiful. And again, it's important that in my perspective, at least when I look at mentors or people that impact my life, it's important that they've been through it, because there's safety there knowing that you've been through it too. So I think that's beautiful. So you have your Soulmatics, you have your coaching, you have your cohorts, these men's and women's programs. What is, let's look at like the next 60 days, because I think visionaries are wonderful and I love hearing people's vision. What does the next 60 days look like for you on your journey?
So yeah, grounding in the lower chakras is grounding into structure and grounding into foundation. And so for a lot of people on this path, like we can be really comfortable up here, but then like we can have allergies to structure, and like it feels just more dense. And I'm at a place now where I'm ready to build foundation for the movement that I'm leading, and so structures, systems, and strategies like to create that foundation so that we can really be anchored in and solidly like in the bedrock. Like, all right, now we can really grow this thing. And so that's a priority, and the right collaborators, because that is like emergent and timely right now and authentically inspired, then the right people to help me do that are coming into my field. And from that place, now with more systems and strategies, it actually frees me up to focus on things that like I'm really passionate about and really excited about, like world-changing movements. And so it's like getting the business side of things just grounded in that way will allow me to expand into more world-changing projects.
We love that. One door opens and then they suddenly keep opening. And it's like this person shows up and that person shows up. And I say life is magic. It's the divine intelligence of everything, because it's like we couldn't do any of this. I couldn't put this person here to talk to this person. Like, I mean, just thinking about the organization of hundreds of thousands of people to make you meet this one person is wild to me. I can't even imagine. And so that's what's cool about receiving and surrendering, is that when you do that and you take a step back and you watch things that are happening, it becomes so special. It's so fun to sit back and watch it all unfold and not attach yourself to any perceived outcome, because I'll tell you, the outcome is always better than you imagine it to be if it's the right thing. And then if it's not, it'll be really, really hard and like uncomfortably awful until it forces you to move into something that you're supposed to move into. So it's just funny how it all works. I think it's so cool. So I love that. So where can people find you? If they are listening to this and they're like, this is for me, I know that this is for me, where can they find more about you?
My website, philkreutzer.com, which has all my links on it, Instagram and Substack. I'm starting a Substack. So those are the places.
Perfect. And I'll link all that in the show notes as well. So it'll click away and they'll be able to find you, which is beautiful. And then so at the end of every episode, I ask the same question. It's the tagline to the show, but the vision that you carry is the answer someone's searching for. So if you could speak directly to the person your work is meant for, the one who's listening right now, maybe in their car or on a walk, or who feels something in what you've said, but isn't sure if it's for them, what would you tell them?
What I would say is, like, so many people that I work with, they're like right on the cusp of this breakthrough that they know is possible, and they've been there for a while. And so it's like, what is that gap? Like they can almost quantum sense that there's a level of freedom and flow and ease and grace, like that they just like, oh my gosh, how delicious would that be? And it's right there, but I don't know how to get it. But I know it's imminent. I know it's inevitable. And yet, why isn't it here? And that's what we're holding the door open for, is that path. And so we'd love to have you join the program, and lead you on that journey.
This is really for those people that are like, oh, I know I'm meant for big things. Like I know it, I can taste it, but like, it also feels so far. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that you bridge that gap. You talked about the gap quite a bit. Um, but you bridge that gap between it's like what feels impossible. And I think one thing that we really mentioned that is really important about your work is that it's simple. Your body is here to support you. You can tune into it at any moment, right? You don't have to go through this crazy ritual. You don't have to do anything really hard. You don't have to be in the right container or the right situation. You just have to come back to you. And guess what? You're always with yourself. Like, you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
schedule time. You don't have to find it. You're always with you. And so it's at any moment, you can come back to the body, find the feelings and chase, and kind of and trace that in a way. So one question I want to ask you though is, what does that kind of look like? If I'm a listener and I'm like, oh, I'm really, how could I do this like right now? Is there anything that you could kind of like coach someone through just of what that might feel like what that process might be? If I'm sitting down, do I close my eyes and just find a feeling, especially if people are somewhat numb? I think that we do get to places where we're pretty tapped out. Like I've cut off that lower chakra because I don't want to feel the lack of stability or the lack of security or the fear. I don't want to feel that, so I've cut it off. So what would the first step be for someone to like come back into the body who's maybe never done it before?
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is the people I'm speaking to that feel like they're on the cusp of the breakthrough and that the freedom is right there. It's not through trying harder. It's
Mm.
not through thinking harder. It's not through more complexity. It's through ease and from letting go and opening up to really like allow those identities that believe that they have to perform and do to dissolve. And that's what's like, it is the identification in that is what's keeping us from that which we seek. So everyone's different. There's a term in somatics called thawing, and sometimes like, yeah, people are frozen. Like there's really a lot of numbness, and so it can be slow going at the beginning. We can't rush the process, right? We can't bypass things. It's really just allowing everything to come to us, right? Because this is where the effortless ease comes in. It's like we don't have to earn this. But we need to be able to be in somatic surrender to allow it through. So what that looks like is just breathing. We always begin with the breath because the breath is a present moment phenomenon, but also all that energy that's held in is held in by the breath. And so anyone who's got a bunch of held energy is going to be a shallow breather. And so we can do breath work, right, to open that up and like kind of like stir things loose. We can also somatically open and allow that which is held to be let go of or experienced, and then deeper breath will open to us. So we begin with the breath, and then we open up to the body, and we just become available to emergence. And so whatever's there, because whatever there is the doorway to more. And so that looks like, hey, just doing a body scan. What am I feeling in my body? I'm feeling, tightness or heaviness in my chest or pit in my stomach. And we just bring awareness there and allow the sensation to be sensed exactly as it is. Is where attention goes, energy flows. And so if you just bring awareness to your left index finger right now, right, you're going to feel more awareness present there. You're going to be sensing more sensation than otherwise. Now, if you move that to your right index finger, now what happens is the awareness shifts there and you're feeling more there. And so as we befriend and embrace emergence, that pit in the stomach, we bring our awareness to it. We allow ourselves to just sense it as long as it's there. And as we breathe and receive, that sensation is going to move through us. Energy moves through experience. And so that's how we do it. And then we remain available to anything else that presents. And in this way, we're opening up to the flow continuum because energy is meant to flow. So we're sensing sensation. Now the energy is moving, it's alleviating or dissipating or intensifying, whatever it is, we're available for, with continuity, the experience. And if we just stay available to that, really what we're moving towards is orienting to full openness and constant connection with that flow continuum. Constant experience, constant oneness, just like the flock of birds. Like that's what opens up to us. If we're completely connected to that, one with that, then we actually don't filter things through the mind anymore. And this is one of the things that Soulmatics opens up and offers is this shift in consciousness from third density or 3D, which is more separation, ego-based, time-based, to unity consciousness, higher self-consciousness, which is timeless, present. And in that consciousness, this is a shift from linear computing of the mind to quantum potential, quantum computing of frequency, infinitely more information that we can actually process, not even through the mind. It's just available. We don't need to even process it. It just is here. It's a very, very different consciousness. And it's, expands our potential infinitely. So that's how we do it. And, I teach a whole 3.5 month program on this. It could be 3.5 years, because there's so much in just remembering somatic, emotional, and frequency literacy. It's like we're becoming physics. Like we're remembering that we are just physics. We are just energy. And so how does this frequency relate to this frequency? How coherence is a big thing. Like, Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, vibration in those terms. And so this is why you see all these spiritually awakening people talking about frequency, coherence, these different things, distortions, because it becomes about physics at that point.
Gosh, that's so, I know that that's not a huge part of what we're talking about, but like for me,
No,
that's
it is
what,
actually.
The physics in general is what makes me feel like this is true. And I grew up Christian, right? And I grew up the Bible, and I went to so many different churches. I was the kid that was there 7 days a week. And what I always had a hard time with is that the more into science I got, the more questions I had and contradictions that I was aware of. And when you would ask those questions, it would be like, shh, we just don't talk about that. We don't talk about Bruno. Like we don't discuss it. And so as I had my awakenings, and as I've had a couple of them, it's the fact that like, even like Hinduism talks about the stars, it talks about, space. Christianity never really did that. And then we think about physics, it's like even the chakras and like the energy centers, we can see that. They can test for it. They can map it with technology to actually see these centers. And so it's not just woo-woo science, it's real science. And so I think it's so interesting. And again, you're totally right? We're all energy. And it's like Reiki has been proven. There's double-blind studies now that are proving it, especially long distance, which is phenomenal. And so this is beautiful. And what you mentioned, and I want to tell this to kind of the listeners, is when we think about, there are tons of meditations on the website, or on websites, right? There's tons of healing modalities out there. But there is a very big difference on experiencing those modalities on your own, right? Through the internet and through strangers. And there's a big difference on being in a container and experiencing them with other people, and experiencing them with a practitioner, and experiencing them in the ceremonial space. And so if that really resonated and you really want to know more, I would really challenge you to take a look at these cohorts, at these things that are being offered. They're digital, they're remote, right? Which I think is what I was reading. So you can do them wherever you are in the world. But there is a very big difference. Example I'll use is if you've ever done psychedelics on your own, right? If you've done psychedelics to party, and then you've done psychedelics in a ceremonial space, they are two very different experiences. So if this modality is really resonating with you, I really challenge you to take a look and see if doing either the cohort or doing the one-on-one coaching is calling to you as well, because it does make a huge difference. It really does. Well, thank you so much, Phil, for being here. Really, thank you for bringing this into form, for doing your own work, for going on your own adventures to bring this to the world. I know that what you're bringing to all of us is more than we even realize. It's going to have a big impact. So again, thank you so much for being on the show. And I think this is a wonderful conversation. To everyone else listening, I will link everything that Phil mentioned in the show notes. So it'll be easy for you to find his website. Send him a message, whatever's stirring in you right now, follow that thread. Feel free to leave it in the comment. Now, whatever you're carrying right now, the vision, the calling, the thing that keeps you up at night, trust it. It's not random. It's not too much. Because the vision that you carry is the answer someone is looking for. Don't keep them waiting. So until next time, I'm your host, Ariel, and this is Between Worlds.